Hello everyone, are you ready to learn how to use another extremely popular Excel function? In this video, we'll be talking about the IF function. The IF function or statement is a cornerstone of every programming language, as it allows you to make a comparison between a value and an expected outcome. The IF function is very versatile. It can be used on its own or combined with other logical functions like AND or OR. In addition, you can combine multiple if functions to create the so-called nested if, or use the more recent IFS equivalent. In this video, we'll see some practical examples for each of the main use cases of if. The file we'll be using has one single sheet, with a list of securities, 2 columns with a category and country detail associated with each security, and the value of the securities in $1,000. This is the usual sheet we've been working on also in the past videos. In addition, on the right-hand side, you see 5 different examples. For each example, we have the condition to be tested with if and an empty column to write our formulas. Let's start with the first example. We want to highlight securities with a value greater than $10 billion, or 10 million as it is written in column D, where the value is stated in $1,000. Here we'll use a basic if, and let's write it here. So equal if, open the parentheses, and we need to start with the logical test, which is what we need to check. In this case, if the value in cell D2 is greater than 10 millions. And we write it here 10, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Next, comma, value if true. What to display if the value is greater than 10 millions or $10 billion. Here, we don't have any specific request, we can simply put 1, comma, value if false. In this case, we can put 0. We close the parentheses, we press enter, and we have, in this case, 1 as 170 millions is higher than 10 million. If we want to paste the formula down, we can double click on the little square here, and we see we have our list of ones and zeros. This is the basic version of if, with all the values hard-coded into the formula. 10 millions, 1, 0, everything hard-coded. Let's see the second example. We want to highlight securities with a value between $1 billion and $10 billion, or 1 million and 10 million, as written once again in column D. Now, how do we write the logical test? As we have to satisfy two conditions greater than 1 million and smaller than 10 millions, we need to use the AND function. AND returns true if all the logical tests included are true. So let's write our formula here. Equal if, once again, parentheses, and now we use AND. We open the parentheses, and now we need to write all our logical tests. So current value, cell D2, should be greater than 1 million. And now, instead of hard coding the values, we can link them to the cells to the right here. So cell L5, for example, we freeze it with F4. Second logical test, the value D2 should be smaller than M5. We freeze it with F4, and we can close the parentheses as we're done with AND. Note that this is a much better way of writing logical tests, as it is going to be much easier to update the formula if needed. As a general rule, having a hard-coded number in a formula is a bad idea. Now, let's complete our if function. So, comma, value if true, we can use 1 once again, value for 0, close the parentheses, enter. And we have 0 in this case because the value is too high. But if we paste the formula down, we see 1 for all the values between 1 and 10 millions. Okay, third example. We have, once again, two conditions to be satisfied, greater than or equal to 10 millions and tech. Yes, with the if function, you can also make logical tests on text strings, not just on numbers. So let's write our if function here, and as we have two logical tests, we need to use n once again. And for the first logical test, value should be greater than or equal to, and to write that in Excel, we need to first type the greater sign and then the equal sign. This is how you write greater than or equal to. And we can use 10 millions at cell M5. Once again, we freeze it with F4. Okay, and the second logical test, the category should be tech. So, comma, we select the category B2, should be tech. And for the second test, if we want to hard code the text, we need to put it in quotation marks. So we write quotation marks, tech, close the quotation mark. We'll see in a bit the only exception to this rule. We close the parentheses as we're done with the logical test, comma, value if true, 1, value if false, 0, close, enter. And in this case we have 1. We paste the formula down, all the other values are 0 because Apple is the only security satisfying the if requirements. Let's move to the fourth example. In this case, we want to highlight all the securities that are either tech or consumer. So since now we have two valid options, we need to use the logical function OR. OR returns true if at least one of the logical tests specified is true. So let's write once again if, and now we use OR as we said, and the logical test. So first test, the category B2 equal to, and this time let's not hard code anything and let's link it to cell K11. We freeze it with F4. This is the first logical test, and the second one is category once again equal to consumer. F4, we close the parentheses and we're done with OR, comma, and now value if true. Here we can really write anything. We can stick to 1 once again, or we could write some text like yes. In this case, we need to put it once again in quotation marks. Or we could type true. True is the only text together with false that do not need to be put in quotation marks. As you can see, as we write true, true is an Excel function, and as such, it doesn't need the quotation marks. So let's keep true for value if true, and for value if false, we can write, for example, no in quotation marks. We close the parentheses and we press enter. As you can see, in this case, we have true because Apple is a tech category, and if we paste the formula down, we have some true and some no. And we finally reached the last example, example number 5. In this case, we have 4 different ranges. If the value is lower than 1 million or $1 billion, we want to write low. If the value is between 1 million and 10 millions, we want to write medium. Between 10 millions and 100 millions, high. And higher than 100 million, we want to write very high. We basically need to check which is the value in column D and pick the right line of the table on the right here. I'll show you 2 ways of doing this with if. The first method relies on the so-called nested if, which means writing one if within another if within another if, and so on. Some kind of Inception-like thing, a dream within another dream within another dream. Okay, let's see how it works. We start tackling the first case. So we write if, and if the value is lower than the higher limit 1 million of the first line, then the statement is true, and let's freeze L16. And if the value is true, we want to display low, and we freeze M16 as well. Note that we do not need to specify the minimum range, since it is 0 here. In case the if logical test is false, it means that the value is higher and we fall in one of the cases below. But we still need to determine which one. So, value if false, we need to open another if. We have another logical test, which is the same as before, just one line down for the test. So, D2 once again should be now lower than 10 millions, and we freeze L17. Again, we don't need to specify the lower range, because if Excel is evaluating this second if, it means that the value is by definition above the lower range of 1 million. In case the new logical test is satisfied, we'll have medium. So cell M17 and we freeze it. If not, we need to go one line down and open another if. You start to understand why this structure is called nested if. We keep opening new ifs until we reach the end of the table. So if the value D2 is lower than 100 millions, F4, comma, value if true, high, F4. Okay, and now we're at the end, because we simply need to select M19 value if false, because if D2 is higher than 100 million, then we only have the last available option, F4, and now we can close all the parentheses for all the ifs, 1, 2, 3, and we're done. Let's press enter and we have very high. We double click once again and we paste the formula down in all the securities. Let's go through the formula again and see what it does. So, first if 117 millions is higher than 1 million. So the logical test is false and we move to the next if and the next line of the table. Second if D2 117 millions is once again higher than 10 millions and we move on. Third if false again, because 117 is greater than 100 million, so we reach value if false and very high. Nested if can be a bit daunting at the beginning, but once you get the gist of it, you'll realize that it's nothing more than a repetitive formula. The second method to select the correct value to be displayed uses the ifs function, which is a slight variation of the if function, introduced from Excel version 2019. If you have an older version of Excel, you won't be able to use this function, and you'll have to stick to the nested if. Ifs works exactly like a nested if, but if you use ifs, you won't need to add all the other if within the formula. So let's see how it works, and let's add another column here. Ctrl C, we select column J, Ctrl plus, we Ctrl Shift down, delete the formula. We call this example 5b. Okay, and here let's use ifs. So equal ifs. We open the parentheses, and as you see, we have logical test number 1. And this is once again the first logical test, so cell D2 lower than 1 million, F4, comma, next, value if true, 1. What do we have to do if D2 is lower than 1 million? We need display low, and we freeze it with F4 once again, comma. Now we do not have to write if for value if false. As you see, we have the second logical test to be tested right away. So in this case, we can just write D2 lower than 10 millions, F4, comma, value if true 2. So if this second test is true, we write medium, F4, comma, and now we can start right away with a third logical test. You see why it's easier? Because you don't have to repeat if all the times within the formula. So 117 millions, D2, lower than 100 millions, F4, comma, value if true, we want to display high, F4, comma, and now when we're at the end of the table, we can close with the logical test true, which means something like if you've come this far. Well, if you've come this far and all the other logical tests are false, simply use the last available option, which is very high, and 19, and we press F4 to freeze the selection. Now we can close the only parenthesis we open, we press enter, and we get the very same result of the nested if, but without repeating if every time. If we paste the formula down, we see we have the very same result for all the securities. Before we conclude, note that in example 5, by writing strictly lower than the upper limit here and here, we always included the lower boundary in the range. So 1 million is going to fall within the medium bucket, and so on. These are the most important things you need to know about if. I hope you liked this video. As usual, feel free to leave a message in the comment section, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button below if you want to stay up to date with the upcoming videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.